So this is a Rubber Down custom install on a 2017 King Quad 750. Kind of started a little bit already. So right up here is a bolt. It's a 10 millimeter. You'll take that bolt out. There's also a radiator hose that runs from the bottom here all the way back there to that right there. That's your intake into the motor. And it comes out up at the top. And you can't really see it, it's up there. But there's a intake, or the exhaust coming out of the motor back to the radiator. So the first thing I did is I disconnected both those hoses and drained all the radiator fluid that I could. There's still a little bit still left in the motor. Can't really see too well, but there's still some left in the motor. I'll flush that out later. You take these two 10 millimeter bolts out, which will allow this radiator to lift up and down. I'm leaving my winch in. I'm gonna try and see if I can't maneuver this out. Some can, some can't. It all just depends on the winch that you have. Okay, I've got it a little bit better removed. So there's two sensors. Okay, this one appears to only have one here. Some of them will have a thermostat sensor. It'll be up on the top of the radiator. This one doesn't have it. This one sits somewhere else. I'm not sure where. So, but there's the power cables for your fan. Come out of your fan. They go up here, and they come into this connection right here. It's kind of hard to see, but it comes into this connection. You just undo that connection. It's two wires. And you'll be splicing those later, so don't cut anything until you're like certain that you're ready, and then we'll go from there. All right, so that is your connector for your radiator fan power. It's got a little retaining pin. Can't really see it too well, but you take a flat-headed screwdriver, you push on that while you pull down on this part. It's a little tricky. I had to spray it with a little bit of I used Penetrol. You can use a PB Blast or whatever you want to use. Clean it up real good before you put it back together. Get all that grease and oil or whatever you used out. Put a little dielectric grease in there, can't hurt it. But then Rubber Down Customs actually provides you with a small piece of wire to extend that. You'll need to extend it, most definitely. Just match up your colors, your black to your black, red to blue, whatever colors you have. Some of the older models I think are black and white. And then there's another color, I think gray. Just make sure you match your colors on both ends. I'm using barrel connectors. You can pick these up at any Home Depot, Ace Hardware, auto supply store. And then I have a special tool that'll crimp them down real good, tape them up, and then you'll be ready to reinstall. All right, so here's the radiator once I've removed it. You can see it's pretty clogged. It's one of the best reasons to do a radiator relocate. I mean, it's generally about 50% clogged right now, and that's even with spraying it and cleaning it real good. I mean, really the best you can with a hose after every ride. It just gets packed in there, and without a pressure washer, you ain't getting it out. So, but this is your radiator reservoir. That'll be reused. Your fan. Now at this time, what I did is I took the time to clean it real good. I took the hose, let it soak, let it just spray in there, cleaned up everything as best I could. And I'll show you on the other one that I did. So this is the front of the radiator that I can get really clean, well, relatively speaking. But you can see, even over here, it's just so packed. It's only getting about 10%. Maybe 50, because look at all that's packed in the back. So we'll get that all cleaned up before it goes back in. So Rubber Down Customs sends you with a whole bunch of miscellaneous bolts and whatnot. They do send you these nice hose clamps. You'll use those. Now me personally, I didn't use any of the bolt hardware. It does come with like carriage bolts. I replaced it with this is my fiance's bike. I replaced it with grade 1.75 black hardware here, just because I like the look of the black versus silver. But the silver carriage bolts with the squares, there's anti-rotation. They actually go into these spots here, and then you tighten onto the bolts onto the back. I did the same thing with the radiator mount here. I exchanged that for grade 1.75, which are black and they don't rust very easily. But that's actually a completed kit. I'm still working on mine. So here's mine. You see, before I put the radiator in, I replaced different hardware. And I've got stainless steel bolts, or nut hardware back here, just so it doesn't rust. But this is what originally comes with it. This goes through this front plate onto the bracket arm. This actually sits on the rack. That's what I ended up doing. And then the radiator will actually sit down in there. There's a pin on the bottom of your radiator that'll sit right in that hole. And then your brackets on the back side of the radiator will sit right there. And then it's got longer bolts that'll go through there. So here's what I did. As opposed to splicing into my existing hoses, I decided that it was like 10 bucks. I got a section of 3 foot and a section of 2 foot, 3/4 inch radiator hose. I used AutoZone, you know, pick your favorite auto parts store. And I connected it before. I actually mounted it to the top to make it a little bit easier. If you connect it to the motor side first, now you've got to maneuver with this thing with not a lot of space. So it would be a cleaner, crisp install. I started here. As you can see, I went ahead and did my connection, but with the butt splices, taped it up real good. And you can use shrink wrap. You can use wire nuts if you wanted to. Rubber Down Customs sends you a solder shrink connection. I didn't want to use that, so I just went ahead and used my butt splice connectors. The solder heat connection requires a heat gun, which I just don't have at the house. So I went ahead and used butt splice connectors. Cleaned up the radiator real good, cleaned up the fan, got all that mounted back on, so that way when I set it on top, I don't have to take it back off again. So if you decide to just go with the factory hoses, they include in the kit an adapter. You just simply put the adapter in and put your hose clamps on, and then run that side up to your radiator. Make sure you label or remember which side goes to the top of the radiator and which side goes to the bottom. So that way you don't get them mixed up. Your radiator won't work right. It'll be very inefficient. But you can see where I've got the new radiator hose. There's the bottom. There's the top side. Put nice stainless steel hardware on there. Also, the other thing that I did is I noticed the 3/4 radiator hose. I had kind of a hard time getting onto the radiator and the motor side, so I simply just took a knife and kind of wallered out the inside right here, just to give it a little bit, just to be able to get it onto the radiator and onto the motor side. That way, which is a little bit easier for me. That's what I did. Make sure that when you do that, none of the droppings, none of the cut rubber goes into the hose. It'll get in your radiator and clog it up, and it won't work nearly as efficiently. So this is my finished product on my Rubber Down Customs. Last step, once you get all your hoses ran, just tighten down your bolts here. Tighten down all your bolts. Fill your radiator here. Just double check it as it runs. Make sure you don't have any leaks down there or up there. Make sure nothing's leaking. Once you're satisfied that nothing is in fact leaking, you're ready to go. So if you have any questions, let me know.